Welcome to Commander Central, episode 240, and today we're going to talk about that most ancient and revered of traditions, killing people with combat damage. I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
Gentlemen, welcome back. How's it going?
Going
Peachy.
good.
It's super bizarre being... So first of all, I'm recording... My recording area moved. I'm upstairs now, so I actually have windows. And like looking outside and seeing snow melt off my roof in the middle of January is very disconcerting because I keep like feeling like it's spring out, and it very much is not.
Yeah, I've been debating if I should even go out and shovel. There's like hardly any snow out, and I'm like, and it's melting right now, and it's just gonna be a soupy mess, and I'm like, oh, I don't even know what to do right now.
So this was funny. I listened to a podcast yesterday, and I apologize for forgetting what the name of it was, out of Australia, and they had Brando from CCO on.
Commander Crunch?
Commander Crunch, there we go. Yep, thank you, Max. So I listened to that show, and it was funny. Instead of talking about the cold weather like we do, they began the show talking about the spider problem. I'm like, so that's that's the Australian equivalent of us complaining about the cold at the start of the show, is them complaining about all the various spiders that have bit them that week. Like, how Aussie is that?
I will take the cold over getting bit by a spider any day.
I absolutely will, for sure, do the same thing. Because, like, this one wasn't venomous, but this one was. I'm like, nope, I don't need to know that. I don't need to have to keep track of what spiders in my house are venomous or not.
Yeah, I've heard things like in places like that, or for instance in Texas, because we have family that lives in Texas, like when you get up in the morning before you put your boots on, you gotta flip them upside down and shake them out and all stuff like that. So I'm assuming you have to do that there too.
I'm sure. No, thank you. I'm not interested in that at all. So about fun games this week. Anyone got any games? And I think Max finally got to get back online and play. Did you?
I did not get a game in this week yet.
Well, Chris did. He actually got to play a little bit of Magic in person at EDH Night at our shop this week.
Yes, I did. I had heard from our local store owner that there had been a lot of people showing up for Commander Nights. So I went down there to see what the buzz was all about. And yes, a lot of people showed up. I think we were at, 6, 4 is 10, 14, 15 people were there. So I got to sit down and play with a couple of new players. I might have beat them really hard, and I felt like a complete tool the whole time, but it wasn't like I was trying to beat them. So I could definitely tell they were new players. I got to give out some advice to a player. He was playing Edgar Markov, and he did the telltale sign, you're a new player, and he overextended. Just vampire after vampire after vampire. I look at him, I'm like, how many cards in your hand? He's like, 1. I'm like, damnation. And he's like, I was like, yeah.
Hey now, I take offense to that. I've been playing for years and I overextend all the time.
Yeah, we before we went on the air, Chris had mentioned that we were talking about how we, it's been a pretty long time since we've actually gone out and played with like random people in public. Yep. But we need to really make sure we have that like intro level deck to play with all these people that probably picked up the format in the last, year or so, and that are playing pretty basic level decks. So
yeah, because all the new sets coming out, I had discussed that I was going to visit my decks and retune them and all that. And I retuned Alesha, and when I went out and played, I played with our store owner playing 1v1 against his mono white SRAM deck. And we played about 4 games. I won 3 out of the 4, but they're all close games. So I'm like, okay, this is perfect power level. And then I sit down with these 3 other people, and it was like just nonstop. Like, I don't know if I had God draw or something, which I know I didn't, but it just bam, I came out of the gate and I'm just like, where's the removal? Where's the board wipes? Where's everything else? What's going on here?
Yeah, I think I've been meaning to try to put some kind of a Boros set together anyway, and so therefore then it's kind of power capped just by being Boros.
Yes.
So maybe I'll use that for I'll figure out some way to build something there and use that for my new player deck that I know is pretty power capped. So I need to look into that a little bit more here before we get back out there and start playing in the real world.
I do have to say, playing in person was very awkward. You're spaced out. I'm used to sitting right next to the person next to you. Everyone has their masks on, so like voices are muffled. You can't really see facial expressions. It was definitely a different experience, and I don't know if it's something I want to do all the time, but maybe one game here a week or so will be fine. But it was definitely not something I enjoyed per se, because you didn't get to see the smiles and all that fun stuff that you usually do.
Well, hopefully as vaccinations and stuff float out there, we can kind of begin slowly entering the real world again for playing games, hopefully maybe even by spring. So I'm definitely looking forward to that for sure.
Oh yeah, it would be wonderful.
I got to play a couple games on stream this week with EDH Recast, and the one game that was notable, I got to do some crazy Fraxion Triniform stuff. And
Oh no.
And it worked out nicely. The guest who was on, Amanda Stevens, she had the turn rate before, or a couple turns before, had played a Painful Quandary. So whenever you cast a spell, you either take 5 damage or discard a card. And it got back to me, and I'm like doing the math. I'm like, okay, if I play land this turn, I can make the 12 mana to encore the Triniform. And if I cast a spell beforehand, I can discard the Triniform to not take the damage to Painful Quandary. So it came to my turn, I was able to like get the Triniform in the graveyard and then encore it back out to make the copies of it, basically, which all then get sacrificed in a turn and like make me the 9 Golem tokens I then had to polish everybody off then following turn with Vela. So Fraxion Triniform, that felt pretty good.
Yeah, we talked about this, a month ago now? I think it was about a month ago. We were discussing our decks and things that we've added, and you said you added this, and I was always curious if it was going to do any work for you, and now I'm scared to see it.
And that was the first time I had actually got it out, too. And actually, I had a tough time killing Matt Morgan because I forgot that he had his Scavenging Ooze in play, so I didn't send enough damage at him to kill him. Or send enough to kill him, but he was able to, like, eat a creature out of like 4 different graveyards and save himself with enough life. And I'm like, oh no. And he had a Primal Order in play. He was playing a mono green deck. Primal Order, and it's an enchantment that during your upkeep it deals damage to equal to the amount of non-basics you had out. And so I'm taking like 7 a turn from his Primal Order.
Oof.
And I needed to kill him pretty badly to like not die to that Primal Order next turn. And basically the only reason I was able to survive long enough was I got a Wormcoil Engine out and gained a couple life off that to keep me alive, to come back around, and then actually was able to kill him the next turn, even through his stupid Scavenging Ooze. So
a Wormcoil Engine. I want to know what went through their mind when they made that card. Let's just make a 6/6 for 6 that has lifelink and death touch, and guess what? When it dies, now you have 2 3/3s.
That card is so good.
I love that card.
It is a phenomenal card. I just want to know who made it, because I mean they were a genius, because it fits like all the niches, and it's not like OP, but it's OP at the same time.
Right. And always feels really good to have it come into play. Like you never feel bad to drop a Wormcoil Engine for sure.
Everyone else on the table does feel bad, though.
Yes. That's, not really your problem. So if you out there in listener land play some cool games or want to talk about some spiders that have bitten you lately, how would you get a hold of us and do that, Chris?
You can find us on a multitude of social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can search us up on Facebox, CMDR Central. You like how I threw the Facebox in there again?
I do. I enjoy that. Yeah.
You can find us online by searching CMDR Central, and you can find us on YouTube by as well, searching CMDR Central.
You can also head over to patreon.com/CMDR Central and check out our reward tiers if you are so inclined to support us financially. We want to say thank you to the following new patrons this week: Matt Flucher, Justin McGinley, Brett Cash, and Brady K. All easy names this week, guys. So stay tuned, because the deck tech coming out later this week, I screw up a bunch of stuff.
Including the name of the commander.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. I apologize 4 days in advance, 3 days in advance for that.
Well, yes, thanks to the patrons that started supporting the show. Thanks for our long-term supporters. And thanks for the listeners for just showing up and listening and supporting us just by playing the show and clicking that like button and subscribing on YouTube or iTunes or whatever podcast listening app you use. We appreciate it, and it does mean a lot, especially right now when things are pretty tricky for a lot of people. So thank you all very much. It's a big deal.
Yes, you guys are all awesome. Thank you.
So should we jump into this here, the oldest of topics, which is command damage?
Yeah, it's called windshield wipers for a reason. You just turn them sideways and then turn them back the other ways.
We've talked about a ton of ways of winning games, but we've never really got to just the basics of turning bodies sideways and hitting people in the face for damage to win games, basically.
Yeah.
So first of all, I want to ask you guys this question. Oftentimes, when I'm listening to podcasts or hearing people talk about Commander, I hear them say it's hard to win with a combat damage step in Commander compared to other formats because you're not dealing 20 damage to one person, but you have to deal 40 damage essentially to 3 people to win. Do you guys think that's true, both the statement and the fact that it's tough to win with command damage? And I'll throw it to Max first here.
So are we talking command damage or just damage in general? Because I think those are 2 separate things.
Yeah, I think just the damage step in general, whether it's command damage, whether it's whatever.
Okay, so I don't think either of those statements are true because this is a multiplayer game. So your opponents are hopefully doing damage to each other as well through combat or other ways to deal damage like burn spells or shock lands or stuff like that. So I feel like if you go into a game expecting to take out 3 other players all on your own, you probably have a deck that is equipped to do that, and you already know you're probably the archenemy. But because it's a multiplayer format, I think taking out 3 people over a course of time is pretty easy to do in Commander. In fact, that's always how I build my decks first, is to win through combat damage versus combo or other ways to win, decking myself or milling my opponents.
How about you, Chris? Do you think it's that difficult to win that way, or do you find it to be relatively easy?
I find it simple as pie. As Max was saying, there's all that incidental damage that happens. So I did a little bit of rough math with this, and this is going off of such as like when I play Modern or whatnot, so I did it kind of basically the same way. So you look at all the incidental damage that could happen, such as Max was bringing up, like shock lands, other random damage from other players or whatnot. So let's say each person's going to start at 30 life. So if you're playing in a 3-person game, the 2 people who are against the other person, that's 15 damage per person you have to deal. Now in a 4-person game, that's 10 damage per person. So you look at it that way, you don't have to deal 40 damage to someone. If everyone pitches in, an X amount of damage, it's minimum to nothing that actually takes it to kill someone.
Yeah, I have kind of in agreement with all of that as well. Yes, is it possible you're going to sit on that pod sometime with like 3 people who are all just playing combo and like no other damage happens and you're at turn 8 and everyone's just trying to get to their combo and you're like, I'm never going to cut through 120 life on all these people. Like that can happen, but very rarely. I can't think of the last time I've seen it.
I guess you didn't have that rule 0 conversation before you sat down
maybe,
at that table.
But okay, this is an extreme example, but like this is a thing that happened recently in a game to me. Joey Schultz on our EDH Recast stream was playing Virtus and Gorm, and I forget which does which, but like one of the 2 when it hits you does that thing where you lose half your life. And Joey had the Monarch, and I only had 1 attacker, but he was on tap the turn, and I'm like, well, if I hit him, I can get the Monarch and draw a card, but he's definitely going to hit me back, and I'm going to lose half my life. I'm like, yeah, but that 1 card, and I'm at 40, and I'm like, yeah, it's worth losing 20 life to draw that 1 card. So like, I made that, like, that was literally my mental thought was, I'll be fine at 20, but I really want 1 more card. So I essentially sacrificed 20 life to draw a card. Now that's probably not a good choice, and I don't know if I would make that every time, and you probably shouldn't rely on other people to be as greedy as me.
Yes, you would, Dana. You would make that choice every time as long as you weren't at 20.
You probably are correct.
So listeners, if you go back in time, I don't remember how many episodes ago this was, we were discussing how Dana does not know what a life total is. He just starts, yep, and then he looks over, I'm at 3 life. I better figure something out.
My favorite example of that was I was trying to cast a Painful Truths one time where you like it's 2 and a black and it has a converge.
Yeah.
So you draw a card and lose a life for each color of mana spent to cast it. And I was in a 3-color deck and I'm at 2 life and I'm trying to figure out if I can cast it for 1 black to draw that 1 card. So I have not gotten better about that during the pandemic. I am still wildly irresponsible with my life total in a game. But yes, so I do agree. Like, even if it's, whether it's Sylvan Library or people taking damage off that fetch land into the shock land and they're taking 3, you just don't have to cut through 120 life very often. At least in the places I've played. I mean, I'm sure there are metas where you do, but like I just don't think I think that's much more the exception than it is the rule. So I think we all agree this isn't nearly that difficult as it sometimes is made out to be.
Yes.
I also so for me personally, I get everybody starts at 40 and you got to get them to 0 or 21 commander damage. What I kind of tend to focus on if I feel like I'm not keeping up in a game with any of my decks, you don't have to do all 40. You have to deal the last X. Hey, if Dana's at 3, I just have to deal 3 to him. I don't have to worry about 37 more points of damage. I just have to deal the final X amount of points to knock that person out of the game. And when you start kind of thinking that way, it makes it more realistic, I think, in your mind. Like, yeah, I can knock multiple people out in a game with combat damage because by the time I'm ready to make that attack, they're not at 40. They're at 10, 15, 8, so it's very situational as well.
And everyone's doing that simultaneously for the most part. Everyone's chipping one another and trying to get the Monarch back and trying to draw the card off their, the cards off their new legendary squirrel from Kaldheim or whatever. Like, Like that's everyone for the most part is trying to do that thing as well. So
Yeah. I mean, the best way I look at it is, keep it in mind, say you play Llanowar Elves on turn 1. Turn 2, you have nothing to do with that mana. Punch that 1 damage.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's every little bit helps.
I'm gonna swords that Llanowar Elf if you ever do that to me.
I would laugh. I'd be like, way to waste that swords, buddy.
you force-willed my turn 2 Sylvan Library once.
Oh, that was the right play. I don't care what you say.
And worst case, it made for a good story.
It did.
It did.
So I was kind of trying to figure this out looking at kind of the ways you would describe combat damage. And there's a lot of overlap here, but at least I found some basic breakdowns. You can go wide, so you can like make a bunch of tokens or play a bunch of elves or goblins or something and try to hit people with a swarm of things. You can go tall, so you can, put a bunch of auras or equipment on something or a bunch of +1 counters or find some way to buff your creatures. So one creature is doing a ton of damage or 2 creatures are doing a ton of damage, whatever. You can kind of go the route Max's Dromoka deck goes and my Asperia deck goes, where you're just kind of using big beats. So you've got a bunch of creatures that are like hitting for 5 or 6 each, just because I think most dragon decks tend to work that way. You're just every dragon in your deck is dealing like 5, 6, 7 damage. So a couple of those bodies in the air getting a couple swings is enough to take somebody out. You obviously have commander damage as a way to kill people, combat damage step as well. Infect is one. And then there's kind of an asterisk here. You can just kind of attack when the opportunity comes, even if you don't necessarily have, even if you haven't built to one of those plans, there's still openings for you to swing through for a little damage here or there, and sometimes just take somebody out. Like even in a combo deck, you can find chances to attack and kill people.
Yeah, I've seen that numerous times in combo decks with your, like, Baral or the Goblin guy, when you're doing, like, combo shenanigans that way, where it's like you look over, a guy's only at, like, 2 life. It's like, well, I'm just going to attack you and kill you off, and then turn and I can do my combo on the rest of the table.
Yeah, my Crash deck isn't a combo deck. It's a fling deck, but it does tend to kind of work that way, where, like, I'll get a bunch of counters on Crash from something, and I'll be ready to fling him, but I'm like, well, I definitely can just swing and hit that person, so I might as well do that first, and then fling it at somebody else.
Yep.
So is there any preference for how you guys like to build your combat damage decks, or do you usually mix and match these kind of things? How about you, Chris? Do you have a preference here?
I guess it depends on the theme that I'm going. Like, if I were to, like, we'll say Voltron, for instance, that is a theme deck. So then pretty much the deck is built to do it that way. Now, if you're building just every other type of deck, like, we'll say, for instance, my Alesha deck, which is more of like an enter the battlefield effect deck, it's just the old-fashioned way of just, whenever an opportunity opens up, you come through for damage. You don't just, focus on going wide or going tall or any of the other shenanigans.
Well, that's a good example of that, too. Why I said there's a ton of overlap here, because you have a lot of creatures in that deck that when they ETB, they make tokens.
Yep.
So you do kind of go wide, but you're not just relying on that, because you also have plenty of bodies in there that are like hitting hard for 5 or 6 themselves as well.
Yep. Yeah, it's an overlap of everything, but you just do it when the opportunity strikes. You can't just go every turn, attack, 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 because then that leaves you wide open to just get smacked back. And, people always want their revenge. This is the game of revenge. I swear it is.
How about you, Max? Do you have a particular preference here?
I'm kind of with Chris here. It kind of depends on what I want to do. So as we've discussed in the past, when I go to build a new deck, I look at either a color combination I haven't played or a theme I haven't done. So Tuvasa was an Enchantress deck. That's Voltron. The commander tells you what to do, like Chris said.
Sure.
Where, like, Dromoka is just, since you can't cast spells on my turn, it allows me to play these 6-drop angels and dragons and big flyers that typically you wouldn't want to risk taking a whole turn to cast because they're going to get countered. That's my big beats battlecruiser magic deck. So it definitely depends on what I want to do. I have that gold tall idea with Regna and Krav, where Krav, the goal is to commander damage you out with Krav, but I have a huge supporting cast where, cool, I gained life, I make bodies, I did something, I make more bodies, so I do have that go wide approach as well.
Well, and even in Dromoka, you are, at least you did for a long time, had a Blackblade Reforged in there.
Oh, yeah.
And I think a Berserk, so you could very easily turn that kind of into a go tall deck as well, like instead of just the big beats. So you're like, well, I could one shot somebody now with Dromoka because I have Blackblade in the deck.
Yeah, that's never leaving the deck, Dana, unless they make a better version of it where it's like free to equip to a legendary.
I highly doubt it.
That card is so good. No, yeah, and I kind of do the same thing. Like looking at my decks, for the most part, some obviously like my Sigarda deck almost always is winning with Sigarda going tall. That's just how that deck tends to work. So that's maybe the exception. My Talrand deck almost always is going wide because there's just no way I'm going to kill you with Commander Talrand damage, I don't think. But, outside of that, like my Glissa deck, I can go wide and I can sometimes go tall with that deck as well. My Asperia deck kind of works the same way. It's kind of big beats, but there's a few things let me go wide in that deck. So I'm not roped in necessarily to one strategy for plenty of decks as well. It gives me some options for sure. And I think that's nice. That lets you kind of make your own, it lets you flex how you're going to win based on what your opponents are doing. Like if you're too locked into one strategy and they have something in place that counters that, you're kind of locked out. But whereas if you have the option to flex a little bit around what they're doing, it gives you way more opportunities. So
yes.
Okay, so we talked about the kind of strategies here, or how we broke down how you can play in the combat damage step. But I think more important than the way you do it is the support cards. I think like when we do a set review or we're looking at someone's deck tech, when you're talking about a win condition, it usually just isn't, I hope I have a bunch of tokens out and can kill someone, or I hope I have my commander out and I can kill someone. There's usually support cards that make whatever the strategy you're running makes it even better. We mentioned Blacklighter Forge, for example, would be great in a go tall artifact equipment deck, but like Max can just run it in his Dromoka deck and have it be a really good card. So I think that go over some of our favorite kind of win conditions or cards that work really well with helping you turn your combat damage step into the way you win the game. And let's go through the colors here first. Max, what are your favorite like win condition cards or cards that make it easier to win with command damage in white?
Okay, yeah, so I think the first one to talk about is the brand new card from Commander Legends, a Chromas Will. A 4-mana instant from Commander Legends. You choose one, but if you control a commander as you cast it, you get to choose both modes, and the modes are creatures you control gain flying, vigilance, and double strike until end of turn, or creatures you control gain lifelink, indestructible, and protection from all colors until end of turn. This is like the haymaker of haymakers, I think, in white right now. You can use it offensively, defensively, but specifically if we're talking damage, you hope you can get it for both modes, so you gain life, you get some double strike. If your commander already doesn't fly, or any of your creatures, you get some awesome evasion, and it sets you up for next turn because they have vigilance and you can block it coming back when the swing happens at you. Just a great overall card, and I love it. I love it so much, and this is why I play white, everybody. It's the best support color.
I agree with that.
That card definitely helps make the argument for sure, yeah. And you mentioned using it defensively to make your creatures indestructible, but like, I guess I don't want to delve too deeply into semantics about it, but you play things like
Eerie Interlude and Ghostway, that stuff?
Yeah, Eerie Interlude and Ghostway, Max. And those don't necessarily help you win, but like those are what keeps all your stuff in play. It turns someone else's board wipe almost into a win condition, because instead of everything resetting, they go to Wrath of God and pass a turn, and your stuff just all survives. Yeah. So that next turn, your board state that you already had is so far ahead of everybody else's.
Yeah, some other notable cards to discuss here are things like Cathar's Crusade. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, everything gets a +1/+1 counter. You have to use every die in the card shop just to keep track of it. But it does win games. It makes your entire army of 1/1s into millions, and it's hard to block that.
You have to do math, which isn't really a good time.
No.
Math's no fun. But Cathar's Crusade wins games, yes.
Another one is Divine Visitation. This is the enchantment that if you were to create a token, create a 4/4 angel creature token with flying and vigilance instead. So you just build an army of flyers to knock through, and 4 damage is quite a bit. That's 10% of your starting life total. So when you get 3 or 4 of those going, you're knocking people for 12 every turn. So that's kind of fun. Following Divine Visitation up is another big token maker in Anointed Procession, the white Parallel Lives, essentially. We'll follow that up with True Conviction. All your creatures gain double strike and lifelink. In the right deck, that's your win con. I know it is in my Dromoka deck. It's in Asperia, but it's also one of those cards that if you drop a True Conviction in a token deck, giving your 32/2s double strike and lifelink, you might lose some bodies, but you just set up for your next turn to pretty much win because you're going to be at 60-70 life for all you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, something that White has always kind of been known for is anthems. Just static effects that pump your entire team. So like Dictate Heliod is one that comes to my mind. Everything gets +2/+2 and it has flash. There's a bunch of them. I can't think of any more off the top of my head. There was one of those Force of the White Force from Modern Horizons was an anthem.
Yeah, I mean, like Honor the Pure, and there's a bunch of them on creatures, and like Crusade back in Original Alpha, buffs all white creatures. There's a ton of them.
And white creatures in general also buff each other. So like you'll see a lot of like soldier anthems or warrior anthems baked into creatures themselves.
And what's nice about a lot of these, and this will probably be true of a lot of these cards in the list we go down, is they don't require you to do anything different with your deck. Like Max just slotted a Chromas Will into his Dramoka deck, and his deck, his combat stuff just gets better. You have to change nothing. You were going to be swinging with like 3 big beaters anyway, and now they have double strike and protection and whatever. Catherine's Crusade, if you're playing a token deck. Hey, I've got a deck built around making tokens constantly, and I'm just going to drop Catherine's Crusade, and next time I make them, they all get infinitely larger. Or they all turn into 4/4 Angels with Visitation. Or I make twice as many of them with Loaded Procession. These are just cards that like you just put them into your deck, and the thing you were doing just got more effective. So I will kind of jump over into some of the ones in blue here that kind of do the same thing. And blue...
Blue is known for combat damage.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So the blue list is probably our shortest here. There's not that many, but there are things like if you're playing flyers, I'll use my Talron deck for an example. Gravitational Shift giving flyers +2/+0 and making everyone else's ground creatures smaller is really effective. Like in decks, that's a way to win a game with combat damage.
Isn't there another one too, like Divine Winds or something like that, where
favorable winds that gives them all
favorable
one
wins? Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, there are blue anthems out there as well. Blue has a lot of effects that keep stuff from being blocked.
Yes, I didn't even think about that one.
Yeah, so in addition to having flying, which is relatively common in blue too, but like even if you don't, make all your stuff unblockable in some way, whether it just is a card that makes it unblockable or gives stuff island walk, or blue has stuff that gives your stuff flying if it doesn't have it. There's ways to punch that damage through with your whole team in blue in ways you don't usually get in other colors.
I suppose blue's probably the color that's known for flying too, so it already has evasion built in.
Yep.
So.
And I said the last one, again, is a little bit, we're kind of splitting hairs here, but extra turn spells, like you oftentimes, I think people think of them in terms of combo or something, but if you're swinging with bodies of some sort, getting a second swing effectively and a second draw, basically, with an extra turn spell is a way to win with the combat damage step.
Agreed. I don't know how many times I've played an extra turn spell and I go, all right, we'll play this extra turn, and I draw and I'm like, play a land, go.
Well, yeah, in my Sphinx deck, I don't run extra turn spells, but I have Metamai that is a Sphinx that when it does combat damage gives you an extra turn. And like, I can't think of a time when that wasn't enough to kill somebody, if not multiple people. Like if I have enough bodies in play that I'm getting Metamai out and able to protect it, then and get a swing and get a second swing then, or if I happen to have True Conviction out, get double strike damage and get 2 extra turns because it's based on combat damage. So I get the 2 extra turns off Metamai. That wins a game. And the last one in blue I will mention here is Corrupted Conscious, which is a control magic effect, but it gives the creature infect, and it doesn't have to be cast on something you don't know, something that you don't have control of. So like if you are playing in a blue deck that has big beater bodies in it, that's a way to make that damage kill somebody. Like if you've got have access to a 10 power creature, or your opponents do, maybe even better, you can take it with that spell and just kill people. It's a like on a stick kill spell a lot of times in blue. So that one's really good there too. How about in black, Chris? What do we have for ways to just make your deck better and make the combat damage more effective in black?
We got cards such as Hatred. Now, Hatred is you pay X life, target creature gets +X/+0. Another card similar to that is like Howl from Beyond, which is an X and a black. You pump X amount of mana into it and give the creature the same exact status effect as what Hatred is.
I actually got to use a Howl from Beyond when we played with Scrap Trawlers on their stream with our $50 budget decks before Christmas.
That's
I got to
awesome.
cast a Howl from Beyond. Actually, no, Max,
I didn't think anybody played that card.
It wasn't even on my creature, I don't think, was it? I think it was on somebody else's creature.
No, you used it on Nick's after you gave it to kill Andy, I believe.
Oh, I used the next card on our list. I used Tainted Strike first to give it infect.
And then
I cast Howl from Beyond
to give it the final 2 infect damage it needed.
That's what it was. I am apparently a monster.
So speaking of what you just brought up, Tainted Strike is the next one that comes to mind. Now, Tainted Strike gives a creature for 1 black +1/+0 and infect. So, I mean, perfect card. I have personally seen this. Max, I don't remember exactly who we were playing with, but I remember attacking you for like 10 damage. And they're like, I'm going to Tainted Strike that creature just so you died.
Yeah, it does not have to be your own creature. You can hit somebody else's just as easily.
Yep. I don't remember either, Chris, so it must have been that traumatizing to me.
Yeah, if someone's getting hit for 9 and you have a Tainted Strike in hand, they're going to die. Like, that will kill somebody.
Yeah, I mean, you don't, like we were saying, you don't have to cast it on your own creature,
Yeah.
It's a target creature, so it's a way of getting, it's still combat damage, you're just the one who's, like, stealing the kill type of deal.
You bet.
And then black is probably best known for fear, which means that it can't be blocked except for by a black or colorless creature, I do believe, or is it just black? I don't remember now exactly how it's worded.
Black. Well, a creature that shares its color. Intimidate is black or artifact, I believe.
Nope. So you hit it backwards, Max.
Dang it.
I
was so confident too. Jeez.
Fear is based on the rules from Terror back in the day. So it can't be blocked by only by creatures that are black or artifact creatures. Whereas Intimidate is it has to share a color.
Gotcha.
Okay. Which is why the only things that can block my Vela deck are artifact creatures or colorless creatures because they have to share a color and nothing shares a color with it. So
exactly. Well, yeah, Fear's known, because Fear is probably, I would have to guess, the first effect ever like this. I know this goes all the way back to Alpha, It was a 2-mana enchantment or a 2-mana. Yeah, it is an enchantment. Target creature, can't be blocked by creatures other than artifact creatures and or black creatures. So, I mean, just straight up, that was the effect that black had that let's just get through. You can't, because black's supposed to be scary, mind-numbing stuff, so.
Ooh, scary. Yep.
Now, have you seen some of the old art on some of those cards,
Oh, yeah.
When I was young, looking at that, I'm like, oh, that's kind of gross and disgusting. And I could imagine it terrifying kids back in the day.
Sure, yeah, definitely. So how about you? How about red, Max? What do we have here for red ways to just slot cards in to make your combat damage stuff even better?
Best color in Magic.
Yeah, the worst color in Magic has probably the most things on this list next to the best color of Magic. So we're going to start things off with a card called Shared Animosity. So this is an enchantment that says whenever a creature you control attacks, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking creature that shares a type with it. So you definitely see this in tribal decks, goblins, slivers. I think that's the first place I ever saw it was in Chris's sliver deck way back in the day.
I'm so glad I got rid of that deck. People hated me for it.
Yeah, I mean, Shared Animosity, like in the right tribal deck, again, like you drop that if you've got the 6/1/1s out. Someone's like, "Oh, I'll be fine. Who cares? 6/1/1s." And like you're like, Shared Animosity and move to combat. And you're like, "Oh, I'm dead. I just died."
Another cool instant in red is called Mercadia's Downfall. This says attacking creatures get +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the number of non-basic lands defending player controls. So if you cast this against Dana, you're going to win the game.
You are not wrong. Yeah, I mean, like, but even if someone's running like a deck with 18 basics in it or something, there's still a pretty good chance they've got like 3 or 4 of them in play when you cast this. If it's like turn 7 or 8, so like there's a pretty good chance you're still going to get a really nice buff, even if someone's being kind of conservative.
Yeah, I mean, that's 100% true. I mean, we, on our deck text, we say, at 12 to some amount of basics is probably safe. Well, if you're running 36 lands, that leaves 24 points of additional damage this card could do.
Potentially, yeah.
I mean, and maybe you'll get lucky and play against that 5-color deck that has that super greedy mana base where they only run like 1 of each basic.
Right.
Then this is your haymaker, you're going to win there.
Mm-hmm.
We also have damage doublers in red, so Gratuitous Violence, Fiery Emancipation, Dictate of the Twin Gods. Those all double damage.
The original.
So those are kind of static. They stick around forever. We also have a chunk of cards that are the one-shot damage doublers. So like Jessica, Thrice Reborn, the new Planeswalker from Commander Legends, Unleash Fury, Rush of Blood, Overblaze, Fatal Frenzy. I'm thinking Dana runs all these cards in his Crush deck if it doubles their damage.
I don't run them in my Crash deck, but I do have them in my Crom and Ketis deck because they're one target, so they just double up the damage that Commander's doing. And if I have a way to copy them or stack them or something, and I use like a giant growth kind of effect, Crom goes from 4 to 7 to 14 to 28 really quick.
Oof. Red is also known for extra combat step spells, so if you can't do it your first try, let's do it again, and eventually you'll take someone out. Some other ones are just static double strike enablers like Rage Reflection or Berserker's Onslaught, a nice way for Red to get double strike that isn't like an instant or an aura for an individual creature.
And it's not quite like the beauty of True Conviction is even if you don't kill somebody, there's a good chance you've gained so much life that at least they can't kill you next turn. So they're definitely not quite as good as that. But still, I mean, if you've got any amount of like big beaters in play and you suddenly give them all double strike, particularly like if you're in a dragon deck where they have evasion, that you're gonna kill people with those cards.
Yeah, an old effect that probably goes all the way back to the beginning of the game is Fire Breathing. Most red creatures have this on there. Pay a red to give it +1/+1 or +1/+0 until end of turn, and you do that as many times as you can, and you just knock someone out. And another great way to win in red for the combat step is Threaten effects. So if you don't run a lot of creatures, take your opponents and beat them in the face with their own stuff.
Yeah, what's that card that you love, Dana? It's like 10 mana. Insurrection or something like that?
Insurrection wins games. It absolutely does. That wins games for sure. So, similar to red here, we've got a pretty good list in green too, and those are kind of the colors, I guess it shouldn't be surprising, that are known for swinging in at people. Green, you have all those one-shot cards like Overrun or Overwhelming Stampede or even Return of the Wild Speaker, where like all your creatures get +3/+3, or in the case of Overwhelming Stampede, they get the +X/+O, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control, so that can be insanely big, and that's oftentimes enough to run somebody over and do lethal damage. And you also have that on actual creatures that do that as well, like Crater Hoof being the most famous, but Pathbreaker Ibex is pretty great too, and there's a couple other ones that give creatures +2/+2 in trample or slightly less effective.
Now, what about he's the Fist of Krosa? I can't think of his name, but doesn't he have a built-in ability where you can just keep doing it repeatedly?
Kamal Fist of Krosa has an overrun baked in that you can just activate. If you've got the 5 mana, you can cast it as many times as you want to, and the Nylea does too. It's just for Nylea has a +2/+0 that you can activate as well. So there's a bunch of those effects on creatures, either as an ETB or activated ability. Things like Gigantomancer, where you can make your creatures into 8/8s.
Yep.
Scale Up does that as well. Turns them into, I believe, 6/4s.
Yep, 6/4 worms.
Mm-hmm. God Eternal Ronus, when God Eternal Ronus enters the battlefield, she doubles the power of the creatures you control. And Finale Devastation from the same set, when you lets you tutor up a creature and put it into play, and if you spend, I believe, 12 total mana on it, all your creatures get +X/+O, where X is the power of whatever creature you went and got. So
Gulta,
if you go get Ronus,
+12/+12,
right, go get Gulta or something, or go get Ronus and have it double your creatures and then give them +X/+O. There's a bunch of just gross things you can do there. We talked about anthems in white. Green has a couple. It has Gaia's Anthem, which is just a +1/+1, but Beastmaster Ascension, creatures get +5/+5 once there's 5 counters on it, and in a color where you're playing creatures and probably doing combat stuff anyway.
The greatest anthem ever is in green, and that's like, what is it called? Hieroglyph Illumination or whatever it is, where colorless creatures or creatures of no color get +2/+2 or something like that. Or basic creatures, something like that.
Yeah,
Muraganda Petroglyphs.
Is that the one that I'm thinking of?
Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
Where vanilla creatures get +2/+2, I think, or whatever it is. Yeah, there's a couple of those cool ones in green.
Yep.
We talked about doubling the tokens you make in white, but like green has a ton of those effects. It's got Doubling Season, it's got Parallel Lives. Yeah, Branching Evolution, and not only those do they double tokens, but Doubling Season and Branching Evolution doubles the amount of +1 counters going on a creature. So does things like Solidarity of Heroes and Invigorating Surge that drastically increase the amount of counters going on your creatures, whether it's going wide or going tall with them. And we mentioned Berserk in Max's Dromoka deck, where it just doubles the power of a creature till end of turn and gives it trample. That is oftentimes a win condition as well in the combat step here in green.
Yeah, I think green is probably known for the giant growth effects. The ability to cast an instant that gives an outrageous amount of power and toughness, because the creature's already got trample built in, so that's the way of just coming through and killing. Yeah,
things like, or we had Classification recently that I think gives a creature as a +10/+10.
Oh,
Yes,
God. Was
and then
plus 10, plus
you
10?
tap it and it gets +10/+10. It's an aura.
Yeah, there's all kinds of that kind of crazy stuff in green. Whether it's the enchantments that do it, there's ones that do it based on your devotion to green or things like that. I mean, like just green has all kinds of ways to buff your whole team. So, and again, without really changing much in your deck, if you are playing a token deck, doubling season just makes it better for the most part. If you're playing a go wide deck, Crater Hoof just probably makes it better. You don't need to change anything for almost any of these cards. So, Triumph of the Hordes I don't think we mentioned, is a combination of, it's an overrun with Infect on it. So it does the Tainted Strike thing to your whole team while making your stuff bigger and giving it a trample.
Surprisingly, that's one of the cards I don't see a whole lot of. It's very rare to see it come out of someone's deck.
It's expensive. Like, it's like a $10 uncommon.
Oh, is it really? Okay.
It's gotten up there. And I don't know if you saw today, Chris, there was a Kaldheim creature that got spoiled that has Death Touch. It's a legend. Mono green has Death Touch, and creatures you control with Death Touch deal poison damage.
Oh no!
So
Yes!
poison's back.
I was actually having a conversation with someone at the store about this. Sorry to branch off, but they were talking about, like, you think we'll ever see Infect again? And I was like, honestly, no. I'm like, but they could bring back Poisonous, because Poisonous is dealing damage to players, but it doesn't actually affect the creatures.
Right.
And sure enough, here it comes.
Yep. So we're getting Poison back this set. So yeah. So I mean, and I guess we didn't mention specifically Poison. We talked about Infect, but that's a thing out there too. It's usually requires more planning than this kind of stuff, but that's a way to kill people along with Infect.
I don't think there's a whole lot of it, to be honest with you.
The last one printed prior to this one was, there's an enchantment in Time Spiral in black called Snake Cult Initiation.
Yes.
That gives your creature poisonous, I think poisonous 3. So when it hits, they get 3 poison counters.
Yep.
The thing about poisonous, you can't change that. Like, it doesn't matter if you classification your creature, you can make it as big as you want to. It still just deals the poison damage.
Yep.
So it's definitely I don't know if fair is the right word, but it's much more difficult to abuse than Infect is.
Yeah, I just can't slap a 2020 at you and be like, take it all.
Exactly. So how about colorless options here to do this in the combat step, Chris? So these are things that will work in a colorless deck or just work in any deck.
We talked about Blackblade Reforged. I mean,
Yeah.
phenomenal card.
Yeah.
Costs so much mana to cast. It really doesn't. And it costs so much mana to equip. Oh, but it really doesn't, because you're just equipping it to a legendary anyways. I mean, it's so good. Now, I do believe it's +X for each land you control. So, I mean, just gross disgustingness. Every time I see this card come out, I shudder and pray to God that person's attacking someone else.
Yep, exactly.
Then we have your Anthem base, Eldrazi Monument to Chromas Memorial, giving buffs of some sort to your creatures. You have Door to Destinies and Coat of Arms. Both of these are Anthem based. X creatures makes it X amount better. Grafted Exoskeleton. So we're just talking about Infect, and I do believe Grafted Exoskeleton gives just Infect.
+3/+2, I think, and Infect.
Is it? Okay. I've never actually played that card, so I have no clue. Eldrazi Conscription. Another Eldrazi. What's up with these colorless Eldrazi cards? Just gross.
They're trash.
We have Heroes Podium, where legends come in and they get bigger and they do all sorts of other stuff. And then let's tutor up more legends. And that card is just perfect card. Came out of Theros when legends were big. Awesome. We have the Swords of X and Y. So, I think we're up to 7 swords now, right?
Correct.
Yep. That's just the swords themselves, like Sword of War and Peace, that kind of stuff. And then equipment in general. That's what colorless is known for. The last thing that I threw on here that I actually thought about is vehicles. Because colorless, they don't really have, too much else. Well, I turn my 1/1 soldier token into a 3/3 smuggler's copter and start beating you with that and get the value out of that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a ton of things here in colorless and artifacts that you can use to just ramp up that step. And these work in any deck. I mean, and you probably don't want like an Eldrazi Monument, for example, in a deck without a lot of creatures. But like playing against a token deck, and you're looking at it like, okay, they've got 9 tokens, but I can block 4 of them, and they're only 1s or 2s. And then suddenly they all get flying, they all get indestructible, and they all get +1/+0, and you just died.
Yep. I actually, when I was playing on Tuesday, I had Eldrazi Monument out in my Alesha deck, and I had Alesha and a sad robot. And I was like, well, now watch this loop, guys. I'm like, sack this Eldrazi Monument, draw a card, attack with Alesha, bring back sad robot, get a land. And they're like, oh no. I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, like, you got to deal with that then, because that's perfect. So Max, I'll throw it back to you, and this is a part of the notes I did, and I don't know why, like, my brain, I had a tough time coming up with, like, really good multicolor cards for this list. I just don't know why that was.
Sat for a long time and thought about it too, and I couldn't come up with them neither.
Yeah, I did the same. So the few options we do have on our list for multicolor folks are Biomass Mutation, which I believe makes all your creatures base power XX based on what you put into it.
Yep. So it costs a hybrid Simic, so you're losing 2, but like if you pump, if you make X 6, your creatures become 6/6 or 8/8 or 10/10, whatever it is. So you see that a lot of times in like an Edric deck or basically any deck where you're running like sometimes a Merfolk, if you're playing green blue Merfolk where they have Island Walk a lot of times, things like that, where the stuff is evasive, and then it's also instant speed. So like you can do it after they declare blockers or if they choose not to block. Oh, my guys just suddenly became 7/7s. Sorry.
Surprise! Spiders! Yeah. Wait, no, not spiders.
And the other one we have is Rubble Hulk, which we're specifically focusing on the Blood Rush ability of 1 red and green. You discard Rubble Hulk. Target attacking creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of lands you control. I've been blown out by this card multiple times in Dana's Mina and Den deck, among other landfall decks in general. It's just kind of a nice card for most landfall decks to have.
Yeah, it's just a one-shot beast there, and yeah, there's plenty more of things like that. There's at least one of the ultimatums I believe that give your creatures +5/+5. So there's things like that. For whatever reason, we just had a tough time coming up with a lot of them. So last but not least, here we have lands that kind of do this, and we talked about evasion being a thing, particularly in blue, as a way to poke through. But like lands do that. Rogue's Passage is a really good card that I see played a ton still to this day.
Oh yeah.
Shizo Death Storehouse I've seen do work before, where you give that creature, I believe it's fear, and it's only for legendary creatures, but like if you're playing some kind of a deck that's doing Voltron stuff in black, being able to make it unblockable is pretty useful as well.
Yeah, I forgot about that one.
Dark Depths and Westvale Abbey on a land. Dark Depths, I mean, that's bad news when that Merit Lage comes out. And the creature from Westvale Abbey is really good too. So those are two giant beaters that if you meet these set of conditions, removing the counters in the case of Dark Depths or sacrificing 5 creatures for Westvale Abbey, you get this giant creature that oftentimes is just going to win the game.
Yep.
You have the creature land cycle, like things like Celestial Colonnade or Treetop Village. We just got one that's kind of in the new Kaldheim that was spoiled that has all creature types. So these are lands that you can just spend some amount of mana and turn them into creatures, and it just gives you that much more, like something unexpected or things that survive a board wipe, or even infect in the case of like Blinkmoth Nexus.
Yep.
Where you can poke through with infect damage on that creature.
Now, this is usually where I see combo decks or control decks win, is due to the creature lands, because, they're doing other stuff with their cards, so they don't want to invest those cards into their deck slots. So why not have a land that's already giving you mana that, and when the opportunity strikes, you can just create a creature to do that combat damage.
I mean, Celestial Colonnade was a $50 card for a long time because it was a win condition in a lot of modern control decks.
Thank God it got reprinted. That's all I got to say.
And last but not least here, Field of the Dead makes bodies for you just putting lands into play. With us, maybe you have to tweak your deck slightly and put in a couple snow lands just to make it easier. But for the most part, the thing you were already doing, and now it's just making you zombies to go wide with and pop somebody in the jaw.
Yep, or to avoid the combat step so people don't attack you.
Yeah, because they don't. Right, because now you have blockers. Yeah, a really good land that does that as well.
Yeah, there's quite a few other ones probably. I know I missed some of them when I was looking at them all. I'm just like, I'm just going to do the ones I remember. That's what I'm going to do.
And then this would be a good chance too. Like a lot of this stuff winds up being things that people have found or they've discovered it works well for them. So this would be a good one to get some feedback from listeners out there about what cards that you found really help buff up your combat damage step. But for sure, let us know whether it's on Twitter or in our Slack, and we can maybe even do like a little 5-minute bit here down the road and say, oh, we weren't thinking of this one, or we hadn't heard of that one. So there's a few, I guarantee there's like some Mercadia's Downfall kind of old cards out there that we missed or just didn't even know about that really help with this. So yeah, any feedback would be great here on this one for sure.
Yep. Definitely this is something that, you got to keep in mind. I don't think, aside from if you're building straight combo, a deck, one of the few ways that you're going to win is by the combat step, whether you're the one killing right off or if you're helping to help someone else kill someone. I mean, either way, that's 90% of the games I've ever played. Usually they're ended by combat. It's not combo.
And even if they're not ended that way, people are doing it anyway for one way or the other, even if it's just to get, maybe their combo can't consistently do more than 20 damage to everybody, so they need to get you in range, things like that. I mean, or they need to generate triggers to get, draw cards to get to that point, whatever. It's a big part of the game, and if you can make it that much more effective with some of these cards, that's pretty useful sometimes. All right, any final thoughts from anybody here that you want to share before we wrap things up?
Red's still the best color.
And green is still the very best color, so it's good.
So I guess by that logic, Gruul is the best color combination. Is that what you're telling me?
I can honestly say, if we go back through our notes and what we discussed, and you look at what the options are for combat base, red and green are the two best colors based in the combat step.
If you're looking to do big stompy beater things, I would tend to agree. You want those colors involved in your deck for sure. And we talked about how white has a bunch of tricks too, so I guess Naya is the best way to do it in 3 colors, which is probably true as well. Yeah,
sure is. Blue is still the worst. Blue's good at drawing cards. Good at drawing cards.
Combat damage, that's probably true. All right, I think that is going to wrap up episode 240 of Commander Central. We will be back later on this week with a deck tech. You can find me on the Twitter birds at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDRCentral_Max. And you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. You can find our podcast editor, Rafael Garcia, on the Twitter birds at Ursa Bearwalker. And last but not least, our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. We'll be back on Thursday and again next Monday. Until then, I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.